When I started this channel, I knew that eventually I'd get around to making a video on the Mamma Mia movies. It's frankly shocking that it took me this long to get around to it. If you know me personally, you probably know that this franchise is very important to me, and here I want to go into exactly why that is. So to start with, here's a bit of background for those not familiar with Mamma Mia. It began as a stage musical that opened on Broadway in 2001 and tells its story using a selection of hit songs by the Swedish pop group ABBA. The musical was then adapted into a movie directed by Phyllida Lloyd and released in 2008 on the same weekend as The Dark Knight. Damn, that was quite a weekend for cinema. The film was met with mixed reviews at the time of its release, but has since undergone something of a re-evaluation, developing a cult following that appreciates it for the infectiously joyful piece of camp art that it truly is. I don't pretend that this is an objectively perfect movie or anything, not that such a thing really exists, but for all its faults, it's one I consider to be among my personal all-time favorites. It's the very definition of a comfort movie for me, one that I can revisit anytime I need to lift my spirits. I'm experiencing seasonal depression? Mamma Mia. I'm feeling under the weather? Mamma Mia. A global pandemic has completely upended the way we live our lives for the last 2 years, and it's unclear when or how the world will return to a state that even vaguely resembles normal? Mamma Mia. There was once a time where I would have described this movie as a guilty pleasure, but fuck that noise. There's nothing guilty about loving Mamma Mia. The movie's plot is essentially just an excuse to string together a bunch of ABBA songs, but here's the gist of it anyway. Our main character is Sophie, a sunny young bride-to-be who lives on the fictional Greek island of Kalakari with her single mother Donna, the manager of a struggling hotel. As her wedding to the dashing Sky approaches, Sophie is determined to locate the father she's never known so he can walk her down the aisle. Then she discovers a diary kept by her mother the year she was conceived, and learns that Donna slept with 3 men in the weeks before she realized she was pregnant. Mild-mannered banker Harry Bright, free-spirited sailor Bill Anderson, and Sam Carmichael, who subsequently broke Donna's heart. Realizing that one of these 3 men is her father, Sophie invites all 3 to the wedding under the pretense that it was Donna who sent the invites. Inevitably, complications ensue. Owing to its stage play roots, Mamma Mia is a very theatrical film in nature. Many of the performances are quite heightened, particularly when it comes to the physical comedy, much of which is provided by the dynamic duo that is Christine Baranski and Julie Walters. I think this is what annoyed a lot of people when the movie first came out, but it's also part of the reason I love it. For me, it only adds to the infectious nature of the film. Everybody involved seems to be having a blast, and it's incredibly difficult not to get swept up in their fun. Of course, the most essential aspect of any musical is its soundtrack. Mamma Mia has something of an advantage in that regard because all of the songs are pre-existing hits from a beloved band. It may take purists some getting used to hearing the songs being sung by people other than the members of ABBA, but their tunes are still put to good use in energetic, joyous musical numbers performed with utter conviction by every single cast member. Amanda Seyfried's singing voice is the strongest, and her infectious energy makes it difficult not to crack a smile during her performance of Honey Honey at the beginning of the film, while Meryl Streep continues to prove that there's very little she isn't capable of, particularly with her show-stopping rendition of The Winner Takes It All during the climax. Now, obviously I've got to address the elephant in the room, which is Pierce Brosnan. It's true that he's not really the best singer, and this definitely comes through during his performance of I Do, I Do, I Do, I Do at the end, but you know what? In spite of this, you cannot deny that he's giving it his all, and the fact that he doesn't have the smoothest of voices weirdly adds to the flavor somehow. It's certainly not enough to keep SOS, the best ABBA song, from being an absolute banger. Mamma Mia didn't really receive as much credit for this as it probably should have at the time of its release, but there's a genuine argument you can make for it as a film with a strong feminist subtext. Now, full disclosure, I am a cisgender dude and therefore not the world's foremost authority on the female gaze, but hear me out. Despite the fact that the movie's whole plot revolves around her wedding, the most important relationship in the film is not that between the bride and the groom, or even between the bride and her 3 potential fathers, but the bond between her and her mother. Throughout the movie, Sophie is desperate to learn more about Donna's past, while Donna is reluctant to share details because she's afraid of what Sophie would think of the sexually liberated lifestyle she once led, having been disowned by her own mother after she became pregnant out of wedlock. The importance of their dynamic to the story is driven home by this scene where Donna performs Slipping Through My Fingers while helping Sophie prepare for her big day and reminiscing on all she's been through with her. I cry at maybe 2 or 3 movies a year, and I will freely admit that this scene brings a tear to my eye every time. The feminist subtext extends to the songs as well. The pronouns in Does Your Mother Know are swapped so that it's an older woman warding off an amorous young man, a reversal of the kind of dynamic we normally see in Hollywood movies. Similarly, Lay All Your Love on Me becomes a duet about a couple expressing their equal devotion to one another, rather than just the woman doing so to the man. Mamma Mia may not be a game-changing cinematic masterpiece, or faultless on a technical or screenwriting level, but it is a thoroughly joyful cinematic experience that never fails to put a smile on my face whenever I revisit it. It's also arguably been responsible for ushering in a new generation of ABBA fans, and that alone is worthy of celebration. Okay, let's talk about the sequel now. 10 years after the release of the first movie, we got Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, directed by Al Parker. This is a sequel that, in my opinion, pulls off the exceptionally rare feat of equaling and in some ways even surpassing its predecessor. Picking up some years after the events of the first film, the sequel begins about a year after Donna has passed away, with Sophie hoping to give her hotel a grand reopening and fulfill her late mother's wishes. This story is interspersed with flashbacks to Donna's early life, in which she is played by Lily James. One could call it the Godfather Part 2 of ABBA jukebox musicals in more ways than one. Killing off Donna is a risky move given how central she was to the first movie's story, but it pays off. It allows Here We Go Again to expand on the original's themes of maternal bond by telling an emotionally strong story about Sophie attempting to honor Donna's legacy and finding herself feeling closer to her than ever as she learns more about her past. Here We Go Again also benefits greatly from the casting of Lily James as young Donna. Having to fill Meryl Streep's shoes is not a task any actor would envy, but James proves more than up to the challenge. With her utterly radiant charisma, strong singing voice, and irrepressible energy, she becomes a true-born movie star right before our eyes from the minute she launches into her opening performance of When I Kissed the Teacher. Admittedly, the film's two parallel narratives aren't exactly individually substantial enough to support an entire feature film, but when presented together, they work wonders, as the connections between Donna's early life and Sophie's in the present day create more emotional heft than you might expect. A lot of the musical numbers in Here We Go Again also manage to surpass those in the original film as far as choreography is concerned. Waterloo is a shining example, staged like a sort of blend of old-fashioned Hollywood musical and modern music video, while Dancing Queen is employed to absolutely euphoric effect in the last act. But the movie's standout musical moment comes in the last 10 minutes. As the main story is wrapping up, Sophie's grandmother Ruby, played by motherfucking Cher, arrives in a helicopter to make amends with her family. We then learn that the hotel's new manager, played by Andy Garcia, is Ruby's ex-lover, and his name is... that's right, Fernando. Cher then launches into a duet of the song Fernando with him in an unapologetically cheesy moment that wonderfully encapsulates the Mamma Mia franchise as a whole in all its gleeful absurdity. It is glorious. I was very tempted to go on for 2 full pages about why this scene is a cinematic masterpiece, but I managed to restrain myself to a single paragraph. Maybe in the extended cut. I also have to point out that this movie has my boy Wes Anderson's regular cinematographer Robert Yeoman working as DOP. Look, I get that these movies are not for everybody. It's a very specific wavelength you have to be attuned to, and if you don't like musicals, ABBA, or are just allergic to camp, then they're most certainly not for you. But they know exactly what they need to be and who they're for. And they deliver on those things in spades. I adore these movies, and I will make no apologies for it.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I personally thought you were very good in Mamma Mia.